Hello everyone, welcome to Barry's Book Reviews, episode number 5. Today I'm reviewing I'll Go On by Hwang Jungeun. It was originally published in Korean in 2014 with the title 계속하겠습니다, and the English translation by Emily Ye-won was published in 2018. And this is another book published by Tilted Axis Press. In a previous episode, I reviewed Han Yu-ju's The Impossible Fairy Tale, that was also published by Tilted Access Press. I have to say that in general, the writers they work with are all very interesting, and if you investigate their catalogue, I'm sure you'll find something that intrigues you. The Korean Literature Now magazine has an interview with Deborah Smith, the translator who launched Tilted Axis, and she explains that she wanted to publish works by Hwang Jungeun, quote, for her dark, obliquely fantastical stories of the Korean underclass. And that's a good short explanation or description for the work of Hwang Jungeun. And I'll Go On is actually the second Hwang Jungeun novel Tilted Axis published. They also published 100 Shadows, a very strange and captivating novel that I'll try and review in a future episode. Hwang also has a couple of short stories available in translation. She has one called Kong's Garden, published by Asia Publishers, and at least one for free on the Korean Literature Now website. They're also worth checking out. And having read, I think, everything she currently has available in translation, I have to say I'm a fan. And I'm looking forward to more translations, hopefully in the not too distant future. I'll Go On tells the story of two sisters, Sora and Nana, and their close childhood friend and neighbour Naghi. The novel is set mainly during their young adulthood, with lots of flashbacks and reminiscences about their connected childhoods. I assumed they were in their 20s, middle-ish 20s, but the novel doesn't actually state exactly how old they are. Sora and Nana are essentially left to fend for themselves as children after their father dies suddenly and unexpectedly in an industrial accident at the factory he works on. And this happens when the two girls are, like I said, young children. Their mother, in response to this, their mother sinks into despair and apathy and becomes suicidal, and mostly abandons her role as a caregiver. So the two girls, they have to grow up fast and learn to be responsible and take care of each other. And as they do, they develop a very close bond. And as the novel begins, they're young adults, and the younger sister, Nana, becomes unexpectedly pregnant. And this unanticipated pregnancy tests their bonds and friendships in various ways. This is a very delicate and tender novel that asks questions about sisterhood and friendship and families, and it asks what is the nature of the family. And I'll come back to that more in a minute or two. Hwang Jungeun was born in Seoul in 1976, so I guess she's a Gen X, if you're in the 1976. She debuted in 2005 when she won a spring literary contest called the Kyunghang Shinmunyu Writers Award. She won that with a short story called Mother. She's offered the aforementioned 100 Shadows, today's book, obviously, I'll Go On, and another book which hasn't been translated yet called Savage Alice. She's also written a couple of short story collections, and I believe also published a serialized novel called Dee Dee's Umbrella. And since making her debut back in 2005, she's won several of the big Korean literary awards. She won the Hanguk Ilbo Award, the Shindong-yeop Award, and several others. So generally very highly acclaimed by critics and very popular with readers. And Chang Sung-ju writes in KLN that, quote, Hwang Jungeun's aesthetic achievements stand unique in Korean literature. Her work so far has used fantasy and allegory to reconstruct the voice of social minorities. Her unique aesthetic in portraying her deep interest in social issues stands out among the major achievements of Korean literature in the 21st century. So very high praise indeed. And Hwang connects with her readers so much, in fact, that she's also been called the voice of the Choson generation. And she was sort of labeled or given this title for the way that her work portrays the generational difficulties of Korean youths through the 2010s, for that decade mainly, I guess. And reading Hwang's novels and short stories, she certainly does seem to tap into the fears and desires of the country's generation of disaffected youths, right? Generation of disaffected youth. She's regarded as being at the forefront of this group of these mostly or relatively young writers whose work explores and embodies this sort of Hell Choson view of modern Korean society. That term, Hell Choson, seemed to come to prominence in the early 2010s, after a corruption scandal involving the country's foreign minister at the time, who secured a high-profile employment opportunity for his daughter. Very depressingly common story. But this was, however, just the latest in a long line of scandals that would actually get worse. And if you know about Korea's recent history, then you'll know what I'm referring to there. That minister in that scandal eventually lost his job, but the term Hell Choson was picked up and embraced by Korean netizens. And Hell Choson groups and forums spread across social media where, dissatisfied individuals and disgruntled people could post examples of this unfair treatment and abuses of privilege, which is a very common story. And let me just quote a little section from a Korea Times article around the time. By 2015, Hell Choson was increasingly used as shorthand for a litany of ills blighting the lives of struggling Koreans. It refers to a view of Korea as a highly regimented and regressive society trapped in an ancient feudal-like system that forces individuals through a gruelingly competitive education system in the desperate hope of securing a good job, of which there seem to be fewer and fewer. The wealthy, powerful, or famous can sidestep this relentless, dehumanizing grind, but those who can't often slip through the cracks, forced to live on the fringes, where they're forgotten and marginalized by mainstream society. And like in Hwang Jungeun's work, there have, of course, been a number of novels and stories written about and written for these marginalized young people. And we'll see this theme or this idea of marginalized young people over several of the books I'll review in coming episodes. And Hwang's own work is populated by these forgotten people, by the poor, the abused, the neglected, the abandoned, and the homeless. Her first two works translated into English, so the novel before I'll Go On, 100 Shadows, and a short story called Kong's Garden. They depict the lives of struggling temporary workers who don't have good educational backgrounds, don't have good career prospects, and often have unstable relationships. And that her first novel was 100 Shadows, and it was published in 2010, and it became a word-of-mouth bestseller by sort of capturing the zeitgeist of the late 2000s, early 2010s. And then this book, her third book translated into English, I'll Go On, or second novel, or third work overall, also became popular in that period in the early 2010s when it was serialized in a magazine. So sort of speaking for the youthful generation, the Hell Choson generation. And when it was serialized, it was actually serialized under a title that's very different from the current English title for the novel, and it's quite interesting to look at this a little bit. One of the appealing things about the Tilted Axis books is that they sometimes have little notes at the beginning of their books highlighting an interesting translation or language issue. And in I'll Go On, there's a note explaining the title. So this book was originally serialized from autumn 2012 to summer 2013 with the title Sora, Nana, Naghi. Right, Sora, Nana, Naghi. That's the names of the three main characters, Sora, Nana, Naghi. And this leads us to So, Na, Gi. Right, so the first syllable from each of the three names, and this makes one word, So, Na, Gi. Which is a Korean word meaning a sudden or brief downpour. It's also the name of a famous Korean story. I think that's besides the point for this little section. That title though, Sora, Nana, Naghi, has an incantatory quality. It has a very rhythmic quality. And in the description at the beginning of I'll Go On, it describes it as if it's like a magic spell of protection or a symbol of solidarity. And I love that description of the title, this sort of incantation to protect these free people, Sora, Nana, Naghi. And it also highlights the importance of names. And each character at some point in the novel reflects on the meaning of their name. So in Sora's section, we learn that Ra means water parsley. In Nana's section, we learn that it means beautiful in Hanja. Na also means eye. And Naghi, the Na from Naghi means pot. And he becomes a chef, and he reflects on that connection. But then subsequently, the published title of the book, after it had been serialized and it was published as one volume, one book, the Korean title became 계속하겠습니다, which translates to the English title as I'll Go On, and that's a repeated phrase throughout the book. I will continue, I'll go on, and it also has this sort of meaning of I will continue bearing my burden as I go through life. And that repeated phrase represents the girls' difficult journey through childhood following the death of their father and their mother's breakdown. And it's during that difficult childhood that they meet Naghi, and he's also living with his mother, and no father on the scene. And he has his own problems as well, which are revealed in his section of the book. And as I explained, as they're young adults, as the novel begins, Sora finds out that her younger sister Nana is secretly pregnant. She's very shocked by this because they still live together and didn't even know that her sister had a boyfriend or was in any kind of relationship. And this causes a great deal of friction and tension. It causes them to reflect on the past and the sort of pivotal incidents that have shaped their lives. And it leads them to ask these sort of very profound questions about their lives and how they can live their lives. Have they been poisoned by their mother's outlook on life? Their mother seems to have come to believe that love is death, life is desperate. Can they transcend this way of thinking about family and relationships? Or are they trapped by it? Are they just sort of trapped in the struggle with the issues that life throws at them? Are they just sort of staring into this empty void? Is life meaningless? Or can they break free of these problems? If they didn't have to conform to societal expectations, could they break free from these issues? And the novel confronts this issue of choosing how to live. How free are they to choose how they want to live? They're all living what some would call unconventional lifestyles or having unconventional relationships. But is it possible for them to build their own type of family? I found Hwang's writing style here to be delicate but very evocative. You get a real sense of these characters as fully rounded creations, as people, and her delicate writing expresses a great deal and does a very good job of letting the reader see the interior lives of her characters. It's a novel where dreams, memories and fantasies blend and blur together, and I highly recommend that you check out I'll Go On by Hwang Jungeun.